Israeli airstrike on an apartment block in Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza Strip kills at least 8 Palestinians and injures at least 16. Diplomats from the US State Department meet the new interim government formed by Hayat Tahrir el-Sham. And a US government shutdown approaches after the House of Representatives voted against a spending bill backed by Donald Trump. Hello, good evening, and it's coming up to 8 o'clock almost, Cairo local time, and you're watching Q News. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. An Israeli airstrike has killed at least 8 Palestinians and injured at least 16 in an apartment block in Nuseirat refugee camp in the central Gaza Strip. Palestinian health officials reported that Israeli military strikes across the Gaza Strip killed 15 people on Friday. Efforts to mediate a ceasefire have yet to secure a deal between Israel and Hamas, despite more than a year of ongoing conflict in the region. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC, has welcomed the UNGA resolution requesting an advisory opinion from the ICJ on Israel's obligations regarding the presence and activities of the UN, international organizations and third states. In a statement, the OIC emphasized that Israeli measures, particularly legislation affecting the UN, its agencies including UNRWA, and the international organizations in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, violate the UN Charter and relevant resolutions. The Jordanian Foreign Minister has welcomed the United Nations resolution requesting an advisory opinion from the ICJ on Israel's obligation to facilitate aid to the occupied Palestinian territories. The military spokesman, Sufyan Kuda, emphasized the importance of the resolution, which calls for the protection of civilians and the provision of sustained humanitarian aid in Gaza. He stated that Israel must comply with international law and halt its aggression as Gaza faces an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. They added that Jordan would continue working with the international community to protect Palestinian and UN aid organizations, including UNRWA, which Israel has banned. Qatar has welcomed the UN General Assembly's vote requesting an advisory opinion from the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, on Israel's obligation to facilitate aid to Palestinians, particularly following Israel's ban on the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA. In a statement, the Foreign Ministry said the adoption of the resolution by a vast majority reflected the international rejection of Israel's ban on UNRWA's activities. At the end of October, Israel banned UNRWA from operating on Israeli soil, accusing the organization of being involved in the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack, without providing evidence. Now, for more analysis of the situation, we move across to our newsroom where Mona is waiting for us. Mona.
Thank you so much, Mark. And for further analysis on the current situation in Syria, we're joined by political science professor Ayman Shaheen about Syria and Gaza, of course, the situation in the Middle East. Now, what are the latest developments in Gaza and how do they impact the humanitarian situation there?
Good evening. Thank you for welcoming me. Actually, the situation in Gaza, the main point now and the main focus is on the deal between Hamas and the government of Israel, which I can see actually there's a new point in that deal. Something was changed regarding to the previous negotiation in Doha and Cairo between both sides. What are the new points? I can conclude like this. The first, that in the United States there is a new president, Donald Trump. He's coming next month to be in the White House office. And Netanyahu actually is looking to satisfy what Trump asked him to do to stop the war, or at least to have a ceasefire when he will be in the office. Second, that this war till now took around 16 months of total destruction of Gaza. That Netanyahu, since the first day of the war, he had a clear plan that he's going to devastate Gaza and to make it a place that nobody can live, nobody can stay in Gaza, to encourage Palestinians to migrate, to leave Gaza. He succeeded of such a destruction. All the international reports actually said that at least 80% of Gaza was destroyed, infrastructure, homes, universities, schools, all the civil institutions, everything was in very real destruction. 80% of all of Gaza was destroyed. So he achieved, I think he achieved his goal to encourage Palestinians to migrate, and he's looking to see that huge migration in the future, which I hope he won't achieve that. Anyhow,
right. So, yes, please continue.
Yeah. So a new point in such negotiations, and I can also say that from the leak of the news, particularly from the Israeli side, that there is change in Hamas perspective regarding to some points, like, for example, there is no clear statement in any deal that will say will mention the.
Let me just take it from here. Let me just take it from here, Mr. Ayman, and with regard to mediators who are pushing on for a ceasefire, do you think there is any clue that Netanyahu could be about to agree to a Gaza ceasefire?
Yeah, I think that Netanyahu is going to such a ceasefire. Why? Because let me continue. Hamas, actually, there are some change of Hamas perspective or point of view. It's like this. For example, the first thing is there is no clear statement in any deal that will mention the end of the war. It is just a ceasefire for 4 weeks till 8 weeks. So Israel, as Netanyahu, he mentioned many times that after that deal, he is actually free to continue his war. There is nothing will mention the end of the war. This is first. Second, that Hamas asked before to Israeli withdrawal from Netzarim axis, from Philadelphia axis, from the populated area. What I understood actually that Hamas accepted the existence and the presence of Israeli troops in Netzarim, in Philadelphia, and where the Israeli troops reach in Gaza in the populated area. Thirdly, that there is news that Hamas accepted the return of Palestinians from south of Gaza to the north under the Israeli control. That means that every Palestinian who will move from the south to the north, he will be under the inspection of the Israeli troops.
So you think from your point of view, Netanyahu is prolonging the war of Gaza for his own?
Yeah, there are reasons for Netanyahu himself, for his political future, but we cannot ignore that this war also is serving the Israeli political and military targets. It's not just Netanyahu. There are something for Netanyahu, and there are other objectives. It is an Israeli objective, whether Netanyahu or the Gantz or Lapid will be in the office, the premier in Israel. It serves the Israeli targets and objectives. So something for Netanyahu, but the great majority of the Israeli actually behavior regarding to this war, it is an Israeli objective. It is not just for Netanyahu objectives.
So, Dr. Ayman, what factors could lead the Gaza deal into a decisive phase, and how will it affect the involved parties?
Sorry, could you repeat, please?
Yes, again. Now, from your point of view, what really could be the factors that would lead the Gaza deal into a decisive phase, and how will it affect the involved parties?
You mean the involved parties of Palestinians and Israelis?
Definitely the involved parties.
Yeah.
And now they are not just Gaza and Israel. It has extended.
Yeah. For Palestinians, actually, if that's what I mentioned, according to the leak of the news about the main principles of the deal, actually Hamas gave many concessions and many changes of its point of view regarding to this deal, different of the negotiations during the previous 10 months. Regarding to the Israelis, actually, I think that there will be an effect on the Israeli side, particularly on the opposition. Israeli opposition will find themselves helpless. Why? Because they cannot actually oppose a deal. They cannot oppose the release of Israeli prisoners or detainees with Hamas. And it will be a victory for Netanyahu himself, a victory for what Netanyahu did in Gaza, what Netanyahu did in Lebanon, and even an extended thing to Syria. Because Netanyahu, he announced that he helped of the collapse of Bashar al-Assad regime through the bombardment of Iranians and other militias, the Hezbollah militia, other Iraqi militias in Syria. Anyhow, I think Gaza war, in general, I can say something that Gaza war actually affected all the region. It affected Gaza, even the West Bank, Lebanon, the current affairs of Lebanese internal politics. It affected Syria and the region in general.
At large, indeed. Indeed. Yeah. That was Dr. Ayman Shaheen, Professor of Political Science from Cairo. Thank you so much for your insights. And back to you, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mona. Thank you for you and your guest. Now, Sweden announced it will halt funding to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees and redirect support to Gaza through other humanitarian organizations. This decision follows Israel's move to ban UNRWA operations from late January. Sweden plans to raise its aid to Gaza to 800 million Swedish crowns. That's around $72.5 million, up from 451 million crowns this year. Funds will be channeled through agencies like UNICEF, the World Food Programme and the Red Cross. Gaza-based health authorities have confirmed that the Palestinian death toll from the Israeli onslaught since October 7th last year has risen to over 45,206, with over 107,512 injuries. They added that the Israeli occupation forces committed 3 massacres against families in Gaza over the past 24 hours, killing at least 77 Palestinians and injuring 174 others. Israeli settlers have set fire to a mosque in the village of Mada, located in the occupied West Bank province of Salfit. They also spray-painted racist slogans on its walls. Local residents managed to control the blaze before it spread throughout the whole mosque, limiting the damage to the entrance. No injuries were reported in the attack. Syria now, and diplomats from the US State Department have arrived in the Syrian capital Damascus to meet with the new interim government formed by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. This is the first visit by US officials to Syria since groups deposed Bashar al-Assad earlier this month, signaling Washington's readiness to engage with HTS, an offshoot of al-Qaeda that later renounced ties with the terrorist group. The Pentagon has stated that it currently has 2,000 US troops in Syria, a significantly higher number than previously disclosed figure of 900. Pentagon spokesperson Major General Pat Ryder stated that the additional troops are considered temporary, deployed to support the counter-terrorism mission. Ryder also noted that the previous troop count predated the fall of Syria's Bashar al-Assad.
I was made aware of the fact that, hey, maybe there's more.
Syria's new education minister has announced that starting next week, all references to the former ruling Ba'ath Party will be removed from the country's educational system. The minister stated that education is a red line for the Syrian people, more important than food and water. He added that primary schools will remain co-educational, while secondary education will largely remain segregated. Russian President Vladimir Putin has described Israel as the primary beneficiary of Assad's downfall. During an annual press conference, Putin expressed hope that Israel would eventually withdraw its forces, but noted that they are still being built up. The UN has said that women must be empowered to play a full role in building a new society in Syria and in bringing stability to the shattered nation. Following a visit to Syria, Amy Pope, the head of the United Nations Migration Agency, urged the caretaker government to continue empowering and enabling women, as they will be critical to the country's rebuilding. Syrian citizens have voiced hope for a better future after the ousting of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. According to current and former Syrian officials speaking to Reuters, the country's dollar reserves have been almost depleted. This is due to the government's increasing use of these reserves to fund food, fuel, and its ongoing war efforts.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين.
وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بخوف.
So to Lebanon now, and the Lebanese army has announced in a statement that its units are continuing operations to clear roads, remove debris, conduct engineering surveys and safely detonate unexploded ordnance. The army also urged citizens to avoid approaching areas where its units are operating and to report suspicious objects to assist with the ongoing mission. These efforts aim to clear the way for residents to return to their homes once conditions are safe. The Israeli occupation army has renewed warnings to residents of more than 60 villages in southern Lebanon, cautioning them against returning to their homes. According to the Lebanese national news agency, Israeli occupation forces withdrew from the town of Bani Hayyan in the south after demolishing and destroying homes. In a separate incident, occupation forces carried out a large-scale demolition operation in the town of Kfar Kila. Meanwhile, Israeli drones filled the skies of Tyre, intensifying tensions in the area. Russia has launched a series of missile attacks against Kyiv, reportedly killing one person, injuring 11 and causing damage across the city. Multiple explosions were reported in Kyiv around 7 a.m. local time. The mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, confirmed that air defenses were active over the city. The Air Force stated that Russia attacked the capital with 5 ballistic missiles, either of the Iskander-M or North Korean KN-23 model. The President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, stated that the European Union will provide an additional 30 billion euros of financial support to Ukraine in 2025. Costa added that the European Union has already provided around 130 billion euros in financial support to Ukraine since the beginning of the war in 2022.
The so-called shadow fleet. Second, we added
As for global economic news, a US government shutdown might be approaching after the House of Representatives voted against a Donald Trump-backed spending bill. Dozens of Republicans defied the president-elect by joining Democrats to reject a revised funding measure. If no deal is agreed by midnight local time on Friday, some federal services will begin shutting down from the early hours. The Republican Party's leadership in the House vowed to find a solution to the impasse over government funding ahead of the deadline.
So even though they're the majority party, they can't get us.
US President-elect Donald Trump has issued a warning to the European Union, demanding large-scale purchases of US oil and gas to address the trade deficit or face tariffs. Trump made his stance clear in a Truth Social post, declaring that otherwise it is tariffs all the way. The US recorded a $131.3 billion goods and services trade deficit with the EU in 2022. While the EU exports more goods to the US maintains a surplus in services, exporting 396.4 billion euros to the EU in 2023, compared to 292.4 billion in imports. And that brings us almost to the end of our news bulletin. Here's a recap of the headlines. Israeli airstrike on an apartment block in Nuseirat refugee camp in central Gaza Strip kills at least 8 Palestinians and injures at least 16. Diplomats from the US State Department meet the new interim government formed by Hayat Tahrir el-Shem in Syria. And a US government shutdown approaches after the House of Representatives voted against a spending bill backed by Donald Trump. And that concludes our news bulletin for tonight. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at QNewsEGY, and that's where you can stay informed. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews. Good night.